everybody, it's Christie again, and I'm back with RÖD Wine this week to do another video with you guys. And this week the topic is on one of my favorite things in the world of wine, which is food and wine pairing. Each week we're going to go through certain styles of wine, ranging from light-bodied to full-bodied wine, from white wine to red wine. And I'm going to show you some simple basics about food and wine pairing and actually teach you that it's not rocket science. It's very easy and it's something you can enjoy doing at home and experimenting with yourself once you have the basics. This week your shopping list is very short. All you're going to need is a green apple. In particular, if you don't like green apples, you can get Gala apples, Pink Lady apples, maybe even Honey Crisp apples if they're in season. But when you do shop for the apples, make sure the area around the stem is green. That'll tell you it's on the tart side, a little on crisp side, which is the specific type of apple we need for this wine and food pairing exercise. Then you need a lemon, and you also need some cheese. This is something I just had here at home, and it's a brie style sheep's milk cheese. It's got some herbs in it, fairly mild, so go for something mild as well. Nothing too creamy, nothing too pungent in the brie family of cheeses, and it doesn't have to have herbs either. It's just something I had around here that will work just fine. And of course we're gonna need wine for this exercise. So this wine that I have is a Soave wine from the Veneto area of northern Italy. It's made from the Garganega grape and the Trebbiano di Soave grape. Now, you don't have to get something so complicated as that. Even though it's a very simple wine, you can actually just pick something that you like a Sauvignon Blanc, or even a dry style Torrontés from northwest Argentina. A dry Riesling even would work just as well, just as long as you stay within light-bodied, dry style wine, no residual sugar. So we can do this little exercise together and really experience what happens when you pair certain food elements with wine. But before we even get started tasting, I want us to look at the wine that we have in front of us. So give it a swirl in your glass. Have a look at the color, see how nice and bright it is. Your wine should not be dull, it should be very bright, it should reflect a lot of light on its surface. And when you give it a swirl around the glass, it sometimes has a secondary color than what it might have when it's still. This one in particular has a lot of silver tones. It goes quite pale yellow, even though it's a very nice on the side of golden yellow at its base. Now let's smell the wine, because a lot of what you smell is what you're going to taste, which is important with food and wine pairing to take note as well. So let's smell the wine you have in front of you. This Soave that I have in particular is very strong with citrus notes, yellow grapefruit, lemon, lime peel, and it's even got some nice minerality to it as well. Really nice wine, very crisp on the nose. Okay, so let's have our first sip. Now, on your first sip, don't pay attention to that. That is to mainly just set your palate with the wine. It's your second sip that I want you to pay attention to. So, when you have your second sip, take a mental note or even write some more notes. If you have a pen and notepad with you, take some notes as to where you notice the wine on your palate. Where does it impact your palate? Where is your mouth watering, in particular on your tongue or towards the back of your mouth? That's what we want to pay attention to when we get into the food elements that we're going to pair with this wine. So have another sip. Give that a swirl around your mouth. Really chew the wine, as you saw that I just did. Give some air into it and really pull in the wine, let it aerate, let it get around your palate. Now, what you should have noticed with this style of wine is that you have some impact on the front of your tongue, some sweetness or some watering actually on the front of your tongue and also on the sides of your palate and tongue as well. So we're going to refer to a tongue diagram, which you might be familiar with from school. And what they've taught us is that we taste sweet at the tip of our tongue and sour on the sides of our tongue. Now, that is true to some extent. However, we can also notice certain elements and chemical compounds in foods and drinks when we taste them and when we consume them. And that's what we want to pay attention to with wine. With these dry style wine, on the tip of your tongue, if you're feeling some watery, some salivating coming from the tip of your tongue, or even some tingling, this is actually your palate identifying citric acid, which is what this wine will have. And we'll move on to what you sense on the side of your palate in just a moment. But we're going to start with our first food and wine match for this wine. And as the weeks continue, we'll do more of this. I want to just give you a little heads up. We're going to have some good pairing, and we're going to have some poor pairing with our food and wine exercises. But that's mainly to show you what works and what doesn't work, and also to debunk some misconceptions when it comes to what really works with certain food and certain wine. So we're going to see what happens when we eat citric acid on our palates, which is why we have the lemon. Now, I know we don't go around and eat lemon just by itself, but we do squeeze it on salads, maybe some arugula in the summer when it's nice and fresh, on grilled fish, on baked fish, over nice chicken, baked chicken and things like that. And what happens is when you add lemon to a certain food, that becomes the remaining element that sticks behind on your palate. The same as what you have with the wine. When you swallow the wine, that's the lasting impression that you have on your palate. So let's see what happens when you combine the two. So have some lemon. Very good. And then have another sip of wine. What happens to the wine? What you should notice is, whereas before with the wine on its own, you noticed some tingling at the tip of your tongue, but then you add the lemon to your palate. This lemon has citric acid, the wine has citric acid. If any of you paid attention to your basic chemistry class in school, you might remember the rule that like cancels like. So that's what happens on your palate when you add citric acid to food and you have citric acid to wine. Now, some of you may enjoy really tart and citric wines, but if you don't, this is a good way to soften out the wine. If you noticed, the wine sort of moved back on your palate. So instead of staying more focused on the front end of your palate, it moved back and became more soft. For me, this wine actually resembled more of a green apple or a golden delicious apple as opposed to grapefruit and lemon and other citrus elements. So that's what happens when you add citrus to food. Now we're going to do a second element of wine. And remember I said we'd go back to the impact the wine had on the sides of your palate? Now we're going to focus on that. So that's what your green apple is for. So have a slice of your green apple, take a bite. Have another sip of wine. Now what do you notice on your palate this time? Is this a good pairing? Is this a bad pairing? Or rather, less good pairing? If you notice the wine, maybe some of you might like this, and usually 1 out of 10 people will like this pairing. However, if you pay attention to what happens to the impact of the apple with the wine is almost neutral. It's almost watery in a sense, because one of the main elements in this wine in particular is malic acid. Green apples are full of malic acid. That's one of their main elements. It's mainly fiber, water, and acid. Again, you combine the like acid with the like acid, it cancels out. So what you end up with is a watery wine. And a lot of you this time of year might go for a certain styles of wine like this, and you're sitting on your deck in your patio enjoying the sun, and you have some healthy light fruit snacks with you, and if you do pay attention to them both while you're sitting and eating and enjoying your moments, you might think, oh, I didn't buy such a great wine, but it's not the wine at all. It's actually just an improper pairing. It's not the best pairing that you have with the fruit. And why is that? Because, again, there's nothing to this apple. It's fiber, it's water, it's malic acid, and that's it. There's no real structure. There's no umami, as we like to call it, to this wine. Something that really gives body to the food. So now we're going to add that to the food and see what the difference. And how are we going to do that? We're going to add a bit of cheese with our apple, which to me is a really nice pairing if you're just with food. If you're sitting out and it's nice and sunny and you want something light to snack on, cheese and apples or cheese with fruit is, I think, one of the best things you can have this time of year. So let's try a bit of the cheese. That one's a little bit gooey. And we're going to get another piece of apple here. And we're going to try a bite of our cheese with the apple. And then try the wine again and see what happens. When you're eating, also try to, for this exercise in particular, try to really chew your food and enjoy it. Taste your food. See what's happening on your palate. Another sip of wine. What happens? Do you notice the wine comes back? The citrus and the acidity of the wine comes back, and it complements the cheese. The cheese is very fatty, it's a little creamy, and the acidity of this wine complements the cheese and is able to cut through the heavy fats, making for a well-balanced taste experience on your palate. So by adding some texture, some umami, some body to your food with the fruit that has the malic acid, as the wine does, it puts things back in balance. So you can have, these types of fruit in salads in the summer. You can just have a nice cheese platter with some fruits and things like that, so that'll go well with this type of wine. And for me, it makes wine all that more enjoyable and a nice way to experience other elements of wine other than just sipping it on its own. Food and wine pairing is not necessarily something that we do on a day-to-day basis. So to pair food and wine can get a little confusing, but if you want to explore the wine world a little bit more and learn a little bit more about food and wine, this is a fun way to do it. So that concludes our first food and wine pairing video. And I do hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had some fun. I hope you learned something a little bit more about wine, a little bit more about food, and even the two together. And do come back and visit us on our website. We will have more food and wine pairing videos later on, a little more in depth, but this is a good place to start. So have fun, enjoy your summer, and cheers. See you soon.